Hey everybody, it's the Mountain Man Chef. Guess what we're going to do today? Instead of cooking people food, we're cooking some dog food. And what we're going to do today is basically do some pumpkin dog biscuits. Something very healthy for your dogs, for even your cats if they like pumpkins. But it might be a little bit too crunchy for the cats itself. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to use 2 eggs, 1 cup of pumpkin puree, 1 cup of flaxseed meal, 1 cup of almond meal, and 2 cups of flour, and possibly a whole cup of water, as well as 2 tablespoons of parsley and 2 tablespoons of powdered dry milk. So first thing that we're going to do is crack your 2 eggs into a large bowl. And throw in our pumpkin puree. You don't want to put pumpkin pie puree spicing type pumpkin in here because of the fact that cinnamon is good for dogs up to a specific point. However, nutmeg is not good for dogs at all. It's very toxic to the dogs. So you want to make sure you just use strictly pumpkin puree. So you're going to mix together your 2 eggs and your pumpkin puree. Get it nice and blended in. And then you're going to add your powdered dry milk, 2 tablespoons of that, and then 2 tablespoons of the parsley. If your dogs are anything like my dogs, they have foul breath. So that parsley will help with their breath. You hope. So after you get those 2 mixed together, the powdered dry milk and the parsley, you are going to add your flaxseed meal. Flaxseed meal is really dry, so being up here in the high altitudes, that's why we have an extra cup of water, because who knows what the flour is going to look, or the dough is going to look like after we get it all mixed up. So what you're trying to form is a good stiff dough, so when you bake these in the oven, they won't be too soft like cookies. You want crunchy dog biscuits so it cleans out their teeth. One of these recipes, if you look on the internet, also calls for salt, about a teaspoonful or a quarter teaspoonful or a half teaspoonful. I don't give my dogs any salt. Since I can't have any salt, they're not going to have any salt either. So after you put the flaxseed meal in, we're going to add the almond meal. Mix all that in. And your dough is going to start to get a little stiffer. But you don't want to add the water in yet. So these are pretty healthy for the dogs. Got a lot of omega-3s and vitamins, as well as the pumpkin is really good for the dogs as well. You're also going to then add your 2 cups of regular flour. And you're going to add to that, say about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of oil, and I'm using olive oil. Olive oil is also another good ingredient for dogs, as it is good for them as well. There you go, making a mess.
Good job.
Alright, so slowly start to blend this all together. And it's going to get pretty stiff and pretty messy, but you know, I'm Mountain Man Chef, so I cook and I clean. So got my little helper here, Sophie, who's going to be helping me roll these guys out.
Hola.
And we'll bake them, and you have to bake them twice, basically about 20 minutes on each side. I'm not going to use any fancy cookie cutters or anything like that, so just going to cut them in with little squares and pizza dough, pizza cutter, and you know, you can even use a metal cup or a bowl or something like that, small bowl or something, to basically cut them into squares. My dogs aren't picky on cookie cutter shapes, so they don't really care, they just want to eat them. So if it gets a little too stiff, I just added about a half a cup of water. I'm not going to add it the whole cup all at once, because I just want to get it to a stiff dough texture. So we'll push pause here for a second while I get it all mixed up, and I'll show you what the final dough product looks like. Okay, I'm going to show you what it looks like now. So I added just a little more flour because I had made it a little bit too wet with the added extra water, so I went a little bit too far, but you just go as you go, and this is supposed to be pretty stiff, so it's getting to that point to where it's not sticking to my fingers. Sort of like a nice pie crust type dough texture is what you're looking for. So it's a little too wet still. I'm adding a little bit more flour as I go. You don't want to add too much because of the fact that it's just going to get too dried out and it's going to be just too hard to work with. So I'm saying about 2 tablespoons extra flour at a time. Go a little slow. If it gets too dry, then you add a little bit more flour. So this is getting to the point where it's about ready to be put on the table here. So I can knead it. And I'm just going to pick the ball up, toss it down here on a lightly floured surface. Get all the rest of the goop out of the bottom here. And I'm going to start working the dough around this dried flour that's on the surface. And that's just going to basically absorb some of it and make this a little bit more drier. So if anybody is familiar with my bread recipes, you want it to be the texture sort of like a bread dough, maybe a little stiffer. And if we need to add a little more flour as we go, see it's pretty sticky, sticking to my hands. It's pretty non-appetizing for me, but a dog doesn't care. So adding a little bit more flour. It's about another tablespoon. Smash it in and roll it up. Get it all mixed in together. Alright, so I've been kneading this thing for about 5 minutes. I added another tablespoon of flour, so I'm counting on maybe 3 to 4 tablespoons extra flour. And if you look at my fingers, the dough that was sticking pretty darn well to my fingers has now begun to fall off and stick to the dough ball. So this is getting pretty good at being stiff. And just going to add a little bit more flour to my workspace here because it's starting to stick to the counter. And that will be incorporated in there too. But we are just about ready to roll this out. And like I said, you can use cookie cutters. You can use a shot glass depending on the size of your dog. I've got 2 Boston Terriers and a giant Labrador
something or other.
Golden Retriever, but Chesapeake Bay Labrador Retriever mix, who thinks she's a Boston Terrier, but she has a massive appetite. So, get this into a nice ball, and we are just going to let it rest for about 10 minutes. Let all the moisture get absorbed in there, and get ready to roll this sucker out and start making cookies. But, yeah, no cookie cutters unless you're fancy and you want to do all that. But, you know, my dogs don't care. All right, kind of just scrape your hands, get it off your hands, then roll it back into the dough ball if you want to. But all right, we're just going to let this rest under the bowl for a good 10-15 minutes. And we'll start rolling it out like so. While the dough is resting underneath the bowl, what we're going to do now is just get everything ready so we can start cooking them. So this is going to take a little, time for your oven to heat up. So we're going to turn our oven on to 350. Start preheating that puppy up. Get 2 of your cookie sheets and wrap them up with foil. And we're going to take that same olive oil, drizzle about a teaspoonful on there. That's so your cookies won't stick to it. You can use that Pam or whatever you want, but me, I'm not a canola oil user, and I'm not a big Pam fan because God knows what's in that stuff, especially when you can't pronounce it. So you just get your cookie sheets, line them up with some foil, spread some of that olive oil around. That's nice and evenly coated because it's going to be sort of like cooking biscotti, Italian cookies, and that is where biscotti means you're twice baked. So we're twice baking our dog biscuits as well. And this one's already pre-oiled, so I'm just going to rub that back in here. So while your oven's heating, we are going to check our dough, see how it looks. And my hands are still got a little coating of oil, but that's good because the fact that, this is going to be a little sticky to work with. But I'm going to show you how it's going to look. If you press on the dough when it's about ready and you let go, it sort of sticks to your finger. Okay, but the little indentation that you leave does not spring back up. If it springs back up, your dough's good. You're going to be having like big baked bread for your dogs, but we want this to have a little bit of density to it. So if it's sticky and just sticking to your finger a little bit, then you're good to go. Well, here we are back again. This time Sophie's taking over. So we are going to show you the tools that we're going to need for this next section, and that's a sharp knife, a rolling pin, a pizza cutter. You don't have to have a pizza cutter. You can just use a sharp knife, and a spatula. So Sophie's going to take the sharp knife and cut the dough ball into 4 equal pieces.
Try my best to make it equal.
Down the middle, and
No. I'm trying my best. Get that. Okay, yay.
There's 2. There's 4. 3.
3. Go back to school.
Too old for that. And 1 more will make 4. So you're cutting it into quarters. And you're going to separate them out.
Come on. Yeah. It's really sticky.
It's okay if they stand out in the air and sort of air dry. It's quite okay. Why don't you move those 3 over there because you're going to use the rolling pin. And pick that one up, put it over here. And you're going to lightly dust your workspace with some flour. You can pinch it. And kind of swirl it around there. And put your piece of dough right there. Grab your rolling pin. And we're going to go about 1/4 of an inch thick on here. Alright, stop for a second. See how it's sticking to your rolling pin? You're going to take some of the flour in your fingers and spread it across your rolling pin. There you go. All sides. Make sure it's lightly coated. Okay. Go ahead and roll it out to a nice strip. Push down pretty hard and just get it nice and even. Oops. That means it's just a bit sticky.
No.
So make sure you go all the way to the end, make it nice and even. Be able to go sideways that way.
No.
That's why I like using a broomstick myself. Okay, go ahead and roll it back out. They don't have to be perfect because they're dogs.
They don't care.
Now, do you feel like you're rubbing the counter on that? We have a fancy little rolling pin that I'm not quite used to. Mrs. Mountain Man Chef loves it. That's why I like using a rolling pin, but it has a measurement of how much thickness it's going to be. Come out just a little further towards me here. And that way. It's okay. It's just getting there. Make sure your quarter side is up.
Where is it? Oh.
Okay, move it over that way so you're not cutting it. There you go. Just
I don't
keep it
like
in the
this
middle.
thing.
I don't either. Come closer to me. Alright. Now, she's going to either take her knife or her pizza cutter. It's probably going to do it pizza cutter wise, and she can just make some slices across it, make some nice biscuit shaped little things. And she's going to come up the opposite direction and cut it basically in half. You don't have to worry about that one. We are going to cook that one the way it is. So come up right smack down the middle here. And you can make those just right about yay so. Our dogs do not care what the size is. Alright, and then we are going to get one of our cookie sheets. And if you can peel them off of the counter, we're going to lay them on top of our cookie sheet. Sorry about the brightness factor here. Let me change the position here. They aren't going to spread out. They're just going to bake. The reason why we have the spatula is if it starts sticking to the counter, you can always use the spatula just to slide underneath it and pick them up. Just do it gently so it doesn't stick to the spatula, but good to go. So these are going to bake in the oven for 20 minutes on this side, and then we take them out and flip them over and bake them another 20 minutes. They might rise just a little bit, they might not, but they will be crispy and healthy for the dogs. So as Sophie loads this tray up in the second tray, I have no idea how many of these are going to make. It's always different every time, just depending on how much you cut them. But our next batch we'll show you how we just use like a shot glass or a cup and make round circle type shapes. So when we come back, we'll let you see the second half of the baking part. And then we'll continue on and show us all the batches that we made. These do keep in the cupboard in Ziploc bags until your dogs are finished eating them. They're very healthy for them, and lots of fiber for them, and lots of parsley for semi-decent breath. But a lot of omega-3s, and I wouldn't touch Milk-Bone dog biscuits, sorry Purina or whoever makes that stuff, because God knows what's in anything that these people are making for us nowadays. That's just the way I feel lately. So, yeah, at least I know I made these. At least I know what I put in them. And at least I know they're healthy for my dogs. So we will continue on afterwards. And after we get to the second part of the baking. We put that batch in the oven. Here, we're just going to show you another batch. Sophie rolled out another piece of the dough, and she's going to cut them into circles. So what I'm using, if anybody knows what that is, that's a home canning jar lid. She's just dipping it into some flour, and then she's going to bring it over to the dough and just press it down all the way to the counter and lift it straight up. Reason being is if there's any thickness growth to this thing, they won't spread out. At least they will rise up. That is also a trick that I use for my homemade biscuits. You do not want to twist it, because as you twist it, you seal the edges up and they do not become fluffy or flaky or anything like that. They will actually just become flat and dry, and you probably break windows with them just like these will be able to. But these are for the dogs. Good to clean their teeth. But she's just pressing down and lifting straight up. If it starts to stick too much, she's just going to dip it back into the flour. And we will put them on the tray as well. So it's starting to stick a little bit. She dips it into the flour, comes back over. Now that other part of the dough that's not being cut, she's just going to roll that into a ball back up and just flatten it out some more, and we'll make some more biscuits. So you can go. You can go. So she's just going to grab one of the edges over there and just lift it straight up, and she should be able to just pop them out.
Maybe.
Doesn't matter if you tear them a little bit, but it's just like perforated paper there. So we're going to put these on the tray, as well as kind of roll the rest of these out and start baking them. Like I said before, we'll show you what they look like on the first bake before we flip them over for the second bake. All right, 20 minutes done inside, and melt your glasses here. Take these guys out. They did puff up a little bit. to flip. Okay.
Do this somewhere. Are you filming stuff? That's cool.
Dad's got tough fingers, so we're flipping them over.
Where you like tie it around the legs to like use fabric.
They're a little kind of hard, not hard enough to give to the dogs yet, because they'll be probably dough balls by the time I digest them, and you don't want your dogs to have dough balls. Especially our Billy here, because he has a tendency to get sick on dough. I think he's gluten allergic. So they won't go toasty brown unless you leave them in the oven a little longer, but you don't need to have them toasty brown. You just want to have them nice and crisp. So we'll flip them and we'll put them back in for, we'll go for 30 minutes this time. And we'll show you the finished product.
Oh my god.
Batch is done. We are going to take these out, let them cool down. That's what they should look like. So, if they don't look like that, just leave them in the oven a little longer. They are hot, they're crispy, they will break a window. But your dogs will love them. And, so are your kids.
I already ate half of it.
We have an audience.
Chipotle.
All right. Mountain Man Chef shining off. Dog biscuits. Well, let's do something here. Who wants a cookie? Huh? Sit. You gonna do tricks? You gonna do tricks? Huh? Who wants cookies? Sit down. Sit down. He does. Get down. Shake. Take off. Run and go. All right, go ahead and feed them those.
No, not you.
And the dogs love them. There's Rose.
Pretty.
All right. Easy. Easy.
Easy.
Okay. See, nice and crunchy. Mountain Man Chef signing off. Bye-bye.